"Can you be my second dad?" the billionaire's daughter asked. The janitor's answer made her mother cry. The sound of Claire's high heels echoed through the marble hallway as she walked hurriedly, her cell phone glued to her ear. Her voice cut through the mansion's silence like a blade. "No, Michael, the numbers don't add up. I need those reports by 5 or we lose the client." She passed through the living room without even glancing at the small figure sitting on the floor. Sadie, 5 years old with messy blonde hair, was hunched over a sheet of paper, moving a crayon with absolute concentration. The little girl lifted her blue eyes when she heard her mother pass, but Claire had already disappeared up the stairs, still talking on the phone about contracts and deadlines. Sadie went back to her drawing. It was always the same thing: a small house, 2 figures at the door, one tall and one short. Always the same colors, always the same smile on the drawn faces. The mansion was immense. 17 rooms, 3 floors, a garden that seemed to have no end. But in that moment, the only sound was the soft scraping of the crayon on paper and the distant ticking of the kitchen clock. Claire passed through the room again 20 minutes later, this time carrying a pile of documents. She paused for a second, looked at her daughter and opened her mouth as if to say something. But the cell phone rang again. "Claire Morrison." She answered on the second ring. "Yes, I'm aware of the problem," and off she went again. Sadie sighed, a small, almost inaudible sound that got lost in the emptiness of the house. The girl finished her drawing and placed it next to other papers scattered on the floor. They all showed the same scene, her and a tall figure holding hands, always smiling, always together. "It's me and my daddy," she murmured to herself, gently touching one of the drawings. Richard Morrison had died 1.5 years ago. Sadie still remembered him coming home from work, picking her up, asking about her day. He always stopped everything to look at her drawings. He used to say she was the best artist in the world. Now her drawings were kept in a box in her room. Her mother didn't like messes. It was then that she heard different footsteps. Slower, more careful. Frank appeared at the entrance of the living room, pushing a cleaning cart. He was a simple man in his 40s, with dark hair starting to grey at the temples. He wore the same navy blue uniform as always, impeccably clean. He had worked in the house for 2 years, but it was as if he were invisible. He arrived early, did his work without making a sound, and left in the late afternoon. He never got in the way, never complained, never asked for anything. Sadie watched him as he began to clean the bookshelf. Frank noticed her presence, gave a polite nod, and continued his work. He always did that, acknowledged her existence with a kind gesture, but never interrupted what she was doing. There was something comforting in his precise, methodical movements. Frank cleaned each object with care, as if it were important. Unlike everything else in that house, where things seemed to exist only to impress visitors who rarely showed up. Sadie gathered her crayons and put the drawings in a neat little pile. Frank continued working in silence, occasionally casting discreet glances in her direction. The girl stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she saw a neighbor playing in the yard with 2 children. They were running, laughing, hugging each other. The woman chased them, making funny faces, and the little one screamed with joy. Sadie pressed her forehead against the cold glass. What would it be like to have someone play with her like that? "Sadie," Claire's voice echoed from upstairs. "Did you have lunch?" The girl shook her head, even though she knew her mother couldn't see her. "Maria left a plate for you in the kitchen. Go eat." Frank stopped cleaning for a moment, watching the little girl head to the kitchen. She walked slowly, as if in no hurry to get anywhere. In the kitchen, Sadie ate her sandwich in silence, swinging her little legs that didn't reach the floor. She looked out the window, watching the birds in the garden. Sometimes she imagined what it would be like if she could fly too. Maybe then she could find a place where she didn't feel so small, so lost. The house phone rang. Claire answered from her office, her voice echoing through the house. "Morrison Enterprises. Yes, I can reschedule for tomorrow." "No, I don't have any personal commitments." Sadie finished eating and went back to the living room. Frank was now cleaning the windows, moving the cloth in perfect circles. She sat on the floor again and picked up a blank sheet of paper. This time, she drew something different. a large, empty house, a small figure sitting alone in the middle of a huge room. There were no smiles in this drawing. Claire came down the stairs, talking on the phone. "I need the contract signed by Friday. No, I can't postpone the trip." She passed through the living room, glanced quickly at Sadie, and kept walking. Frank lowered his head and pretended to be focused on his cleaning. "Frank," said Claire, stopping at the door. When you're done here, can you clean my office? I have a video conference in an hour." "Of course, Mrs. Morrison." Claire went back upstairs. Sadie continued to draw, now adding a second figure to the empty house, a tall person carrying papers with their back to the small figure. Frank finished cleaning the windows and pushed his cart out of the room. Before leaving, he glanced one last time at the little girl sitting on the floor, surrounded by drawings no one else saw. The house returned to silence. Sadie carefully put away her crayons and papers. She went up the stairs slowly, her bare feet making no sound on the expensive carpet. In her room, she opened a shoebox under the bed. It was full of drawings, hundreds of them, all showing the same thing, memories of a time when she wasn't alone. She placed the new drawings on top of the others and closed the box. Outside, the world kept spinning. Cars passed on the street. Neighbors mowed their lawns. Children played in their yards. But inside, the silence reigned absolute. The kitchen clock continued to tick-tock. The most constant sound in that house that had everything except what mattered most. Sadie lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling. She closed her eyes and tried to remember her father's voice telling her stories before bed. But the memory was getting fainter and fainter, like a drawing that fades over time. In the living room, Frank cleaned in silence, almost invisible, always polite, always quiet, like a shadow that cared for the house while real life happened somewhere else. The next morning, Sadie woke up to the familiar sound of Claire's heels coming down the stairs. It was 7:30, always at the same time, always in the same rush. Through her bedroom window, she saw Frank pushing his cart up the side entrance of the house. It was Tuesday. He always arrived at 8 o'clock sharp on Tuesdays. The girl dressed slowly, choosing a pink shirt her father always said matched her eyes. She brushed her blonde hair by herself, as she had learned to do in recent months. Sometimes it was a bit crooked, but there was no one to fix it. She went down to the kitchen, where Maria had already left breakfast on the table. The housekeeper always arrived before Frank, prepared everything, and left before 9. "Good morning, dear," Maria said with her thick accent, as she organized the dishes in the sink. "Your mother already left for the office. She said she has meetings all day and will only be back tonight." Sadie nodded, sitting in the high chair at the kitchen table. Her feet dangled in the air. She was still too small to reach the floor. She chewed her cereal in silence, watching out the kitchen window. Frank was in the garden, sweeping the leaves that had fallen during the night. His movements were rhythmic, almost hypnotic. "Maria." "Yes, dear." "Does Frank have a family?" Maria stopped washing the dishes for a moment. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious." "I don't know, dear. He's very private. Never talks about his life." Maria dried her hands on her apron. "Why don't you ask him?" Sadie's eyes widened. "So I can do that." "Of course you can. He's a good person. He's been working here for 2 years and has never caused any trouble." After Maria left, Sadie was alone in the kitchen finishing her breakfast. The idea of talking to Frank made her nervous and excited at the same time. She hardly ever talked to adults besides Claire and Maria. And lately, she wasn't talking much to Claire either. She grabbed her crayons and went to the living room. She sat in her usual spot, on the Persian rug near the window. But this time, instead of starting to draw immediately, she watched Frank work in the garden. He had a different way of handling things, not with a rush like Claire did with everything, but with careful attention. Frank entered the living room around 10 o'clock, pushing the cart carefully so as not to scratch the marble floor. He saw Sadie sitting on the rug and greeted her with a silent nod, as he always did. He began to dust the furniture, moving through the room with the quiet efficiency of someone who knows every corner of the house. Sadie kept pretending to draw, but her eyes followed Frank around the room. Every time he came near, she felt the urge to say something, but the words got stuck in her throat. It was easier to stay quiet, as she always did. When Frank bent down to clean the base of the bookshelf, right near where she was sitting, Sadie finally found her courage. "Do you have a daughter?" The question came out louder than she intended, echoing through the silent room. Frank stopped what he was doing and turned to her, genuinely surprised. It was the first time Sadie had asked him a direct question. In fact, it was the first time she had spoken to him at all. "Yes, I do," he replied after a moment, his voice soft and careful. "She's 5 years old too, just like you." Sadie's blue eyes widened. "Really? What's she like?" Frank put his cloth aside completely and sat back on his heels, bringing himself down to her level. "She's special. She has blonde hair like yours and blue eyes too, and she loves to draw." "She draws?" Sadie perked up, completely forgetting her shyness. "What does she like to draw?" "Flowers, mostly, and butterflies." Frank smiled for the first time since he had started working in that house. "She says when she grows up, she's going to be a real artist." Sadie was thoughtful for a moment. "My dad used to say I was going to be a real artist too." Something in her voice, a mix of pride and sadness, made Frank stop moving completely. He turned fully toward the girl, giving her his full attention in a way she hadn't received in a long time. "Your dad was right. You draw very well. Have you seen my drawings? I see you drawing every day when I come to clean this room, and from what I can see from here, they are very beautiful." Sadie smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Do you want to see one up close?" Frank hesitated for a moment. Technically, he was working. But there was something in the way Sadie looked at him, a shy hope that he recognized all too well. "Of course I do." Sadie picked up the drawing she was working on and moved closer to him. It was a house with a garden, full of colorful flowers of all sizes. Each petal had been colored with care, some with 2 or 3 different shades. "It's beautiful," Frank said, and she could see in his eyes that he was serious. "Your daughter, Emily, she would love this drawing." "How do you know her name is Emily?" Frank smiled. "Because you asked about her, and I hadn't told you her name yet." "Emily," Sadie repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "That's a pretty name." "Does she come here sometimes?" Frank's smile grew sadder. "No, she can't leave the house much." "Why?" Frank was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. How could he explain to a 5-year-old that another child was sick? "She gets sick easily. She needs to rest a lot at home." Sadie frowned, genuinely concerned. "Is she going to get better?" "I hope so," Frank said softly. They were silent for a few minutes. Frank went back to cleaning, but now he moved more slowly, as if he didn't want the moment to end. Sadie went back to drawing, but every now and then she would look up at him. It was a different kind of silence than usual, not empty and heavy, but filled with a new understanding between them, as if a door that had been locked for a long time had finally opened. "Frank." "Yes." "Thank you for telling me about Emily." "Thank you for asking." The next day, something extraordinary happened. Sadie woke up earlier. She ate breakfast quickly and positioned herself in the living room before Frank arrived. When he appeared pushing his cart, she was there, waiting with her crayons and eyes shining with expectation. "Good morning, Sadie," Frank said when he saw her. "Good morning, Frank." She liked how his name sounded when she said it. "Sas, can you tell me more about Emily today?" Frank smiled as he prepared his cleaning supplies. "What do you want to know?" The questions tumbled out in a cascade. Does she like to play? What's her favorite food? Does she have toys? Does she know how to write her name? Does she like stories? Frank chuckled softly, a sound Sadie found very pleasant. "Let's see. She loves puzzles even though she's little. She can put together 50-piece ones all by herself. And she loves pancakes with strawberry jam." "I love pancakes too," exclaimed Sadie, clapping her hands. "My dad used to make them with happy faces. 2 small pancakes for the eyes, a big one for the face, and bacon for the smile." "That sounds delicious," Frank said. "Emily would love that. Do you make pancakes for her?" "Sometimes, on weekends, when she's feeling well, Sadie processed this information with the seriousness of a child trying to understand the adult world. Frank: Yes? Do you take care of Emily by yourself? Frank stopped cleaning for a moment. Yes, it's just me and her. Like me and my mum, Sadie said thoughtfully. Only different. Different how? Sadie bit her lower lip, as she always did when thinking about something difficult. Do you talk to Emily? I mean, really talk? We talk a lot. She tells me about her drawings, about the dreams she had at night, about the little birds she sees from her bedroom window. That's nice. Sadie sighed. A small, sad sound. My mom doesn't talk to me much. She's always busy with work. Frank felt a tightness in his chest. He put his cloth aside and sat on the floor, getting down to her level. So I'm sure she loves you very much, Sadie. Sometimes adults get lost in their work and forget about the most important things. Do you think she got lost? I think she's trying to find her way back. Sadie seemed to consider this answer carefully. Frank? Yes. Can I draw something for Emily? Frank felt his eyes well up, but he kept his voice steady. She would be very, very happy. From that day on, everything changed in the silent routine of the mansion. Sadie started seeking out Frank every day. Whenever he arrived, she was there, waiting with her crayons and a new question on the tip of her tongue. On Thursday, when she asked, "Does Emily have a favorite toy?" "A pink stuffed bunny." "She calls him Pounce." Sadie let out a little laugh, the first truly joyful sound Frank had heard from her. "Pounce is a funny name for a bunny." She was 2 when she chose the name. It made perfect sense to her at the time. On Friday, what kind of flowers does Emily like to draw? Daisies are her favorite. She says they look like little suns. Sadie immediately stopped what she was drawing and started making daisies, trying to make them look like little suns too. Frank watched, fascinated by how she managed to capture exactly what he had described. Over the weekend, Frank didn't work, but Sadie spent both days thinking of new questions to ask him. When Monday arrived, she was practically vibrating with anticipation. "Frank," she shouted when she saw him arriving, completely forgetting to be shy. He smiled. "Good morning to you too, Sadie." This time the question was different, more serious. "Frank, do you miss Emily when you're at work?" Frank stopped what he was doing completely. "I miss her a lot. Like I used to miss my dad when he went to work," Sadie said softly, her voice growing smaller. "Only now it's different." "Different how?" Sadie looked at her own hands, her small fingers still stained with crayon wax. "Now I miss him all the time, even when I'm sleeping, even when I'm waking up. It's like the feeling lives inside here." She placed her hand on her chest. Frank immediately sat on the floor, getting down to her level. "I know that feeling, Sadie. It hurts, doesn't it?" She nodded, her eyes filling with tears she tried to hold back. "Sometimes it hurts so much I can't breathe right. Like someone is squeezing my chest." "And what do you do when that happens?" "I draw," she said simply. "I draw him with me, doing things we used to do together, and then it hurts a little less." Frank smiled with a tenderness he reserved only for Emily. That's a good way to deal with missing someone. Emily also draws when she misses things. What does she miss? Being able to play at the park, run on the grass, do things other kids do. Sadie was thoughtful for a long moment. She must be very brave. Why? Because even though she can't do those things, she still draws beautiful flowers. I think that's very brave. Frank felt a lump in his throat. This 5-year-old girl had just summed up in a few words everything he admired in his own daughter. "You're brave too, Sadie." "I am. Very. You lost your dad, but you can still draw beautiful things. You can still smile. You still ask questions and worry about other people. That's very, very brave." For the first time in many months, Sadie gave a big, genuine smile that lit up her whole face. Frank noticed how beautiful she was when she really smiled, how her blue eyes sparkled and how dimples appeared on her cheeks. "Frank?" "Yes. Thank you for talking to me about Emily and for really listening to me. Thank you for telling me about your drawings and for keeping me company while I work. Do you want to know more about my dad?" Frank saw the expectation in her eyes, the desire to share precious memories with someone who truly cared. "Only if you want to tell me." Sadie settled more comfortably on the rug, crossing her little legs and preparing as if she were about to tell a very important story. He was very tall, and he had blue eyes like mine, only darker. He always smelled like coffee and a nice cologne he put on every morning. Frank listened to every word, every pause filled with longing, every nostalgic smile that appeared on her face when she remembered something special. And for the first time since he started working in that immense, silent house, Frank realized the silence no longer weighed on him. Sadie was talking again, opening up like a flower that had finally found a bit of sun, and most importantly, she was starting to smile. It was Thursday, and for the first time in weeks, rain was falling hard outside. The drops beat against the mansion's windows, creating a steady rhythm that made the house feel even quieter inside. Sadie couldn't play in the garden as she had planned, so she decided to sit in the first-floor hallway. There was something special about that hallway. It was a passageway, but no one ever stayed there for long. The walls were covered with expensive paintings that Claire had bought after Richard's death, attempts to fill the empty spaces that seemed to have multiplied throughout the house. Sadie sat on the marble floor, leaning against the wall, with her crayons spread around her. The floor was cold, but she didn't mind. From there, she could see Frank working in the main living room through the open door. He was cleaning the windows with slow, precise movements. Even from a distance, Sadie could see the care with which he treated every surface. It was almost like watching a silent dance. "Frank," she called out, her voice echoing softly down the hall. He appeared at the living room door, cloth in hand, and smiled when he saw her. "Hi, Sadie. What are you doing on the floor there?" "Drawing. But it's kind of lonely here." She looked at him expectantly. "Can you come sit with me for a little bit?" Frank looked around, checking if there was anything else urgent to do. The house was quiet. Claire hadn't returned from work yet, and Maria had already left an hour ago. "Sure," he said, putting the cloth in his cart and walking over to her. Sadie smiled and patted the floor next to her, inviting him to sit. Frank settled onto the cold marble, crossing his legs. It felt strange to be there, in that elegant hallway, sitting on the floor like a child, but there was something comforting in the simplicity of the moment. "What are you drawing today?" Frank asked. Sadie showed him the paper. It was a drawing of two people in a park, one tall and one small, chasing a colorful kite in the sky. "It's nice," Frank said. "Who are those people?" "It's me and, well, I wanted it to be my dad, but sometimes that's when I draw, I imagine other people with me." Frank nodded, understanding what she wasn't saying directly. "Like Emily when she draws places she'd like to be." "Exactly." Sadie put the drawing aside and looked at her hands. "Frank, can I ask you a really serious question?" "Of course." "Do you feel like Emily really loves you?" The question took Frank by surprise. He was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer. "Yes, I do." "Why? How do you know? I mean, how do you really know?" "Without a doubt." Frank smiled softly. "She looks for me when she's scared. She tells me her secrets. She's happy when I get home, and when she's sick, she wants me to stay close to her." Sadie nodded thoughtfully. "My dad knew I loved him too. I always ran to the door when he got home, and I slept better when he read stories to me." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when two people are thinking about the same important things. Outside, the rain continued to fall, creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. The hallway, which had always seemed cold and formal, now felt cozy. "Frank?" "Yes." Sadie took a deep breath, as if preparing for something very important. Her blue eyes stared at him with a seriousness that didn't match her 5 years of age. "I miss my dad a lot." Frank nodded, waiting for her to continue. "And I know you miss Emily when you're here. And I thought..." She paused, biting her lower lip. "I was wondering if you could be my second dad." The words hung in the air like raindrops on the window, delicate and yet heavy with meaning. Frank felt his heart clench. He looked at that tiny little girl, her blonde hair falling over her eyes, waiting for an answer that could change everything for her. There was so much hope in her face, so much pure and simple need for someone who cared. He chose his words very carefully. "Sadie, I'm honored that you would think of me that way, very honored." She waited, her eyes fixed on his face. "But I can't take your dad's place. No one can do that, because the love you two had was just between you." Sadie lowered her head, and Frank saw that she was trying not to cry. "But," he continued softly, "I can be here when you need me. I can listen to your stories, look at your drawings, talk about Emily, and about everything that's important to you." "Is that almost like being a second dad?" she asked, her voice small. "It's like being your friend, a grown-up friend who cares about you a lot." Sadie considered this for a moment. "And will you keep caring, even when I get older? Always? What if I do something wrong? I'll still care." "And if I draw ugly things?" Frank smiled. "Impossible. But even if that were true, I would still care." For the first time since she'd asked the question, Sadie smiled too. "Okay. Being your special friend is almost as good as having a second dad. It's special for me to be your friend too, Sadie." She snuggled a little closer to him, not enough to touch, but enough to feel that she wasn't alone. "Frank, yes. Thank you for not lying to me. Grown-ups sometimes lie to kids, thinking we won't notice. I will always be honest with you." They sat there in the hallway, listening to the rain and the distant ticking of the clock. Sadie went back to her drawing, now with a more peaceful expression. Frank watched her small hands moving the crayons with concentration. It was then they heard the sound of a key in the front door. Claire had arrived. Frank started to get up. His break had already lasted too long, but Sadie gently held the sleeve of his shirt. "You don't have to leave now," she murmured. "She'll probably go straight to her office anyway." But Claire's footsteps echoed through the entrance hall and started up the stairs. Frank stood up quickly, smoothing his clothes. Sadie gathered her crayons but without rushing. Claire's heels clicked on the marble of the hallway. She stopped when she saw Frank there, clearly not working. "Frank, It was then that Claire paused. There was something different about the scene before her. Sadie was sitting on the floor, smiling, really smiling, as she looked up at Frank. And Frank had a gentle expression on his face, as if he had just finished an important conversation. Claire hid around the corner of the wall, trying to understand what was happening. That's when she heard Sadie speak. "Thank you, Frank, for agreeing to be my special friend. I don't feel so alone anymore." "You're welcome, Sadie. Remember, whenever you need to talk, I'll be here." The words hit Claire like a punch to the gut. Someone outside the family was offering her daughter exactly what she herself couldn't give. A friend. Someone who listened. Someone who made Sadie smile. Claire leaned against the wall, feeling tears start to stream down her face. When was the last time she had sat on the floor with Sadie? When was the last time she had really paid attention to what her daughter was saying? When was the last time Sadie had smiled at her like that? The tears came harder, silent but devastating. Claire covered her mouth with her hand, trying not to make a sound as the truth hit her with full force. She had gotten so lost in work, in grief, in trying to keep everything running, that she had forgotten the one thing that truly mattered. And now it was Frank, the quiet employee she barely noticed, who was giving Sadie what she needed most: love, attention, presence. Claire spent the rest of the afternoon locked in her office, but she couldn't work. Sadie's words echoed in her head like a painful refrain. "For agreeing to be my special friend. I don't feel so alone anymore." Alone. Her 5-year-old daughter was feeling alone in a house where she lived with her own mother. At 7 in the evening, Claire finally left her office. The house was quiet. Frank had already gone home, and Sadie was probably in her room, as she always was after dinner. Claire went up the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. Sadie's bedroom door was ajar. Claire peeked in and saw her daughter sitting on the bed, surrounded by dozens of drawings spread over the pink comforter. Sadie was organizing them into piles, as if sorting through memories. Claire knocked lightly on the door. "Can I come in?" Sadie looked up, surprised. Her mother almost never came to her room, especially not at this time. "You can." Claire entered and stood near the door looking at the drawings. There were so many. How had she never realized how many drawings Sadie made? "What are you doing?" Claire asked, trying to sound casual. "Organizing my drawings. I want to separate the ones I'm going to give to Emily from the ones that are just mine." "Emily?" "Frank's daughter. She's 5 like me and likes to draw too." Sadie spoke with enthusiasm, as if introducing a very special friend. "She draws flowers that look like little suns." Claire felt a tightness in her chest. Sadie knew more about Frank's family than she knew about her own daughter. Can I sit there with you?" Sadie looked even more surprised, but made room on the bed. Claire sat down carefully, trying not to wrinkle the drawings. Up close, she could see the details. Each colorful house, each smiling figure, each small, precious attempt to capture happiness on paper. "These are very beautiful, Sadie." "Thank you." Sadie continued organizing, but Claire could tell she was tense, as if she didn't quite know how to act with her mother there. In this space that had always been just hers, Claire took a deep breath. "Sadie, I heard you talking to Frank today." Sadie's hand stopped in the middle of a drawing. She didn't look at Claire, but remained motionless. "You're not mad, are you?" Sadie asked quietly. "No, sweetie, I'm not mad." Claire chose her words carefully. "But I wanted to understand something." "Why did you ask Frank that?" Sadie finally looked at her, her blue eyes very serious. "Ask him what?" "To be your second dad." Sadie looked down again, as if she had done something wrong. "You heard everything." "I did, and I'm not upset. I just want to understand why." For a long moment, the room was silent. Claire could hear the ticking of the butterfly-shaped clock on the nightstand, a gift Richard had given Sadie on her last birthday. "Do you really want to know?" Sadie asked, still not looking at her mother. "I really do." Sadie took a deep breath, as if preparing for something difficult. When she spoke, it was with an honesty that caught Claire completely off guard. "Because he listens to me." The words were simple, direct, devastating. "He listens to me," Sadie repeated, now looking directly at Claire. "He gives me real attention. When I tell him about my drawings, he really looks. When I talk about things that make me sad, he doesn't change the subject." Claire felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. "I really miss having someone who does that," Sadie continued, her voice getting quieter. "Who really listens to me, who stops what they're doing just to pay attention to me." Every word was like a stab to Claire's heart. She tried to speak, but couldn't find the words. "You're always busy," Sadie said, with no accusation in her voice, just stating a fact. "There's always a phone ringing, or important papers or meetings, and when I try to tell you something, you listen, but you don't really listen." "What do you mean?" "You hear the words, but you don't hear what I'm really trying to say." Sadie picked up one of the drawings from the pile, like when I show you my drawings. "You look quickly and say, 'That's nice and sweetie,' but you don't ask what I drew or why I chose those colors, or if there's a story." Claire looked at the drawing in Sadie's hands. It was a small house with a garden full of flowers. Simple, colorful, filled with details Claire had never noticed. "Frank asks those things," Sadie continued. "Oh, he wants to know about the drawings. He remembers the things I tell him. Yesterday I told him about a dream I had, and today he asked if I had dreamt again." Tears began to burn in Claire's eyes, but she fought to control them. "And you know what else?" Sadie said, looking directly into her mother's eyes. "When I'm with him, I don't feel invisible." The word invisible hit Claire like a gunshot. Her 5-year-old daughter felt invisible, in her own home, with her own mother. "Sadie," Claire began, but she didn't know how to continue. "I know you love me," Sadie said quickly, as if wanting to protect her mother's feelings. "I know you take care of me and buy me the things I need, but I miss someone who really wants to be with me." Claire could no longer hold back the tears. They streamed silently down her face as she looked at her daughter. Really looked, perhaps for the first time in many months. "That's why I asked Frank to be my second dad," Sadie finished. "Because when I'm with him, I feel important." The silence that followed was different from all the silences that had filled that house. It was a silence heavy with painful truths, with belated recognitions, with a love that was there but lost amidst so much absence. Claire reached out and gently touched Sadie's face, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized was falling. "I'm so sorry," Claire murmured, her voice choked. "For what? For not listening to you, for not paying attention to what was really important." Sadie leaned into her mother's touch, like a flower turning toward the sun. "Can you learn?" The question was asked with so much hope, so much innocence, that Claire felt her heart break completely. "I can," she said, and for the first time in a long time she was making a promise she intended to keep. "Can you teach me?" Sadie smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I can. It's easy. You just have to stop and really look at me when I talk." Claire nodded, knowing it was much more complicated than that, but understanding that, for Sadie, maybe it really was that simple. "And ask about my drawings," Sadie added, "and remember the things I tell you." "I'll try," Claire promised. "I'll try very hard." Sadie picked up a drawing from the pile and handed it to her mother. "Want to see this one? It has a story." Claire took the paper carefully, as if it was something very precious. "I'd love to hear the story." And for the first time in over a year, mother and daughter sat together in the room, really talking. Claire discovered that Sadie made up stories for every drawing, that she dreamed of having a dog, and that she still talked to her dad every night before bed. She discovered that her daughter was much deeper, smarter, and more caring than she had ever realized. And she discovered that she was broken inside, but that maybe it was still possible to fix herself. Claire didn't sleep that night. She lay in the king-size bed that seemed even bigger and emptier since Richard's death, staring at the ceiling, Sadie's words echoing in her mind like a scratched record. "When I'm with him, I don't feel invisible." Invisible. How could a 5-year-old child feel invisible in her own home, with her own mother? At 5 in the morning, Claire gave up trying to sleep. She got up, put on a robe, and went down to the kitchen. She made coffee, something she hadn't done in months, always relying on Maria for it. She sat at the kitchen table, watching the still dark garden through the window. For the first time in many months, she didn't turn on her laptop, she didn't check emails on her phone. She just sat there, thinking about her daughter's words, about every expression she had seen on Sadie's face the night before. The conversation, filled with childlike honesty, had been a cruel mirror for Claire. It showed her everything she had lost while hiding in her work, using meetings and contracts as shields against the pain of loss. When the sun began to rise, painting the garden gold, Claire heard small footsteps coming down the stairs. Sadie appeared at the kitchen entrance, in pink unicorn pajamas, her blonde hair a complete mess from sleep, rubbing her eyes with her small fists. "Good morning, Mummy." Her voice was still hoarse from just waking up. "Good morning, sweetie." Claire stood up immediately. "Do you want me to make you breakfast?" Sadie stopped in the middle of the kitchen, blinking several times, as if she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. Usually, Maria prepared everything before 8, or she would get cereal from the cupboard herself while Claire was on the phone. "Good, do you know how?" Sadie asked, tilting her head to the side. The question was completely innocent, but it hurt Claire like a knife. Her own daughter doubted she knew how to do something as basic as making breakfast for a child. "I can learn," Claire said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What would you like to eat?" Sadie's eyes lit up. "Pancakes." Claire swallowed hard. Pancakes were Richard's specialty. He made them every Sunday morning, always in funny shapes, happy faces, butterflies, sometimes even attempts at animals. Sadie loved them and always asked for more. But Claire could try. She had to try. Pancakes it is. 40 minutes later, the kitchen looked like it had been hit by a hurricane. Claire had flour in her blonde hair, splatters of batter on her expensive blouse, and the pancakes were slightly burnt around the edges. But Sadie ate every bite, smiling with each forkful as if they were the best pancakes in the world. "They're yummy, Mommy," she said, licking her lips. "You don't have to lie to protect me, sweetie." "I know they're not great." "I'm not lying," Sadie protested vehemently. "They're different from Daddy's, but they're yummy in their own way. They taste like..." Like you trying. Claire felt a tightness in her chest, sadness at the fond mention of Richard, but also immense gratitude for her daughter's generous kindness. They taste like me trying. Yeah. Like when I draw something new and it doesn't look like what I wanted, but it still has something special. Sadie's simple wisdom left Claire speechless for a moment. How had her daughter become so understanding, so mature for her age? At 8 o'clock sharp, Claire saw Frank arriving through the side gate. She watched from the window as he organized his tools in the garden, the precise and careful movements she had seen hundreds of times, but never truly noticed. She had made a decision during the sleepless hours of the night, and she knew she needed to talk to him before she lost her nerve. Sadie, I'm going to talk to Frank for a minute in the garden, okay? Sadie nodded, already busy spreading crayons on the table. You can go, Mommy. I'm going to draw the pancakes you made. Claire smiled. When was the last time someone had drawn something she made? She went out the back door, stepping onto the dew-damp grass. Frank was watering the plants on the porch, focused on his work, the hose making little golden arcs of water in the morning light. When he saw her approaching, he seemed genuinely surprised. Good morning, Mrs. Morrison. Do you need anything specific? Claire stood there for a moment, suddenly unsure how to begin. The words she had rehearsed mentally seemed inadequate now. Frank waited patiently and unhurried, the way she had learned he did all things. Frank, I'd like to talk to you about something important. Of course. He immediately turned off the hose and turned fully towards her, giving her his full attention. Yesterday I heard your conversation with Sadie, Claire said, the words rushing out. In the hallway, Frank tensed immediately, his shoulders stiffening. Mrs. Morrison, I can explain. I didn't mean to overstep any boundaries. She just... No. Claire raised her hand, interrupting him. You did nothing wrong. Quite the opposite. Frank looked at her, confusion evident on his face. Claire took a deep breath, gathering her courage. I wanted to thank you. Thank me. The surprise in Frank's voice was total. For listening to my daughter. The words came out with difficulty, each one feeling like a stone in her throat. I live for my business. I buried myself so deep in work that I forgot what was most important. Frank remained silent, processing what he was hearing. He had never seen Claire Morrison so vulnerable. Sadie told me everything last night, Claire continued, her voice trembling slightly. How you talk to her, ask about her drawings, remember the things she says. How you make her feel important, seen, heard. And I realized that... She paused, fighting back the tears that threatened to overflow. That I wasn't doing any of that. Nothing. Frank looked at this woman who had always seemed so strong, so in control of everything around her, now standing in the morning garden with eyes full of unshed tears and a voice choked with guilt. Mrs. Morrison, he said softly, his voice full of understanding. She just wanted someone to see her. Every child needs that. It's the most basic thing in the world, but sometimes the hardest to give. And you gave it to her when I couldn't. When I was so lost in my own pain that I forgot she was suffering too. Frank shook his head slowly. I didn't give her anything you can't give her too, and even better, I just stopped to listen. That's all it was. That's what I don't understand. Claire sat on the porch step, not caring about getting her expensive pants dirty. How do you do it? How do you know exactly what she needs to hear? How to ask the right things? Frank hesitated for a moment, then sat on the step next to her, maintaining a respectful but comforting distance. I have Emily, Jorge, he said simply. And when you have a child who depends completely on you, especially a sick child, you learn to pay attention to the little things, to what they don't say as much as what they do, to the silences, the forced smiles, the tears they try to hide. But I have Sadie. I always have. You do. But maybe you were so busy protecting her in other ways, financially, materially, that you forgot to protect her heart, her soul. Frank's words were gentle, but as direct as well-aimed arrows. Claire felt they hit the very core of her guilt. I don't know how to do it, she admitted, her voice almost a whisper. After Richard died, I threw myself into work because it was the only thing I knew how to control. It was familiar territory. With Sadie, I didn't know what to say, how to act. I was afraid of doing something wrong, of hurting her even more. It was easier to make sure she had everything materially than to try to be truly present emotionally. But now you want to learn, Frank said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. He had seen something in her face, in the way she was there, vulnerable and determined at the same time. I really do, Claire said with conviction. I just don't know where to start. I don't know how to make up for lost time, Frank smiled, the same kind, encouraging smile that had won over Sadie. Start small. Don't try to make up for a whole year in 1 week. Ask about her drawings, really, with genuine interest. Sit on the floor with her, listen to the stories she makes up. She makes up stories. For every drawing. Incredible stories, full of adventures, magical characters, whole worlds she creates in her head. Claire realized with a jolt that she knew absolutely nothing about this. She didn't know this facet of her own daughter's inner life. Frank, yes. Can you continue to be her friend, even with me trying to get better? I don't want to take that away from her. Frank was surprised by the question, by the unexpected generosity behind it. Are you sure you don't feel threatened? No, Claire said firmly. She needs people who truly care about her, and I want to learn from you too. I want to see how you do it, how you talk to her. They sat there for a few minutes in a comfortable silence, watching the garden fully awaken. It was strange. Claire had never talked so much or so intimately with an employee, but Frank didn't seem like an employee in that moment. He seemed like an ally, someone on the same team. Mrs. Morrison? You can call me Claire when we're talking about Sadie. Claire, he tested the name. Can I give you a piece of practical advice? She nodded eagerly. Did Richard used to read to her before bed? Always. Every single night. It was their sacred ritual. Start there. Children love rituals, especially at bedtime. It's when they feel safest, more open to talking about their day, about their feelings. Claire nodded, memorizing every word as if it were a precious instruction manual. That night, at 8 o'clock, Claire did something she hadn't done in over a year. She went upstairs, knocked lightly on Sadie's bedroom door and asked, "Can I read you a story before you go to sleep?" Sadie almost dropped her box of crayons in complete surprise. Really? For real? For real? Pick a book. Sadie ran to the small bookshelf and picked up a book of fairy tales that Richard always used to read. Claire sat on the edge of the bed and began to read, trying to do different voices as she remembered Richard doing. Halfway through the first story, Sadie snuggled up next to her, resting her head on her mother's arm. It was a small gesture, but immense in meaning. Claire felt her heart warm in a way it hadn't in a very long time. In the following days, Claire began to implement small but consistent changes. She would wake up 15 minutes earlier to have breakfast with Sadie, without rushing, without a phone at the table. She would ask about the drawings, not just, "That's nice and sweetie," but tell me the story of this drawing, and why did you choose these colors? She would sit on the living room floor while Sadie drew, even when piles of work awaited her in the office. One Saturday morning, she decided to try making pancakes again. This time, she tried to make happy faces like Richard used to. The result was an absolute disaster. They looked more like the faces of scared monsters than happy ones. Sadie laughed so hard she almost choked on her orange juice. "Mommy, I think they're having nightmares," she giggled. Claire looked at the deformed pancakes and started laughing too. How long had it been since she had laughed with Sadie? How long had it been since she had laughed, period? "Let's make them again together," Claire said. "So can you teach me how Daddy did it?" And so, side by side in the messy kitchen, they made a second batch. They still weren't perfect, but they were better. And most importantly, they were doing it together, creating new memories on top of the old ones. Frank observed these small changes from a distance as he did his daily work. He saw Claire sitting on the living room floor, really paying attention as Sadie explained in detail a drawing of a princess who lived in a candy forest. He heard genuine laughter coming from the kitchen in the mornings. He noticed how Sadie now ran to meet her mother when Claire got home from work. something that hadn't happened in many months. One Thursday afternoon, Claire decided to accept when Sadie suggested they play hide and seek. It was the girls' idea, and Claire agreed instantly, even though she was wearing an expensive suit she had just come home in from a meeting. "You hide first, Mommy. I'll count to 20. Claire ran upstairs, trying to remember how to play this game. She squeezed behind the thick curtains of the guest room, feeling a bit ridiculous, but also strangely excited. "Ready!" Sadie yelled from downstairs. Claire heard the small footsteps coming up the wooden stairs, the sound of doors opening, muffled giggles of anticipation. When Sadie finally found her, she screamed with pure joy. "Found you! You're terrible at hide and seek, Mommy." "Am I really?" "Yeah, your feet were showing under the curtain." They played for almost a full hour. Claire couldn't remember when she had had so much fun, when she had felt so free. Frank, who was cleaning the second-floor hallway, paused to watch the scene when they came down. Claire was on all fours on the floor, looking for Sadie under the dining room table, her hair completely disheveled, her blouse wrinkled and half untucked, and smiling, really smiling with her eyes. Sadie was hiding behind the leather sofa, one hand covering her mouth to try to contain the laughter that threatened to burst out. "Taz, where could that mischievous little girl have gotten to?" Claire said loudly, theatrically. "I can't find this naughty child anywhere." Sadie couldn't handle her mother's performance and burst into crystal-clear laughter. "Found you, you little rascal!" Claire scooped her up and they both fell onto the sofa, laughing uncontrollably. Frank smiled too, his heart warmed by the scene, and discreetly continued his work. Sadie was blooming again like a plant that starts receiving water after a long time. She talked more, laughed more, ran through the house with renewed energy, her eyes shining with life. And Claire was learning to be a mother again. Not the perfect mother she thought she needed to be, but the present mother Sadie truly needed. It was beautiful to witness, and Frank felt deeply grateful to have played a small part in this much-needed transformation. It was a Tuesday morning, almost 3 weeks after the conversation in the garden between Claire and Frank. The sun streamed through the living room windows, creating golden patterns on the marble floor where Sadie was sitting, surrounded by her crayons and papers. Frank entered, pushing his cart, as he always did at 10 o'clock. But when he saw Sadie, he noticed something different about her. There was a new energy, a sparkle in her blue eyes that hadn't been there a few weeks ago. "Good morning, Frank," she shouted, waving enthusiastically. "Good morning, Sadie," he smiled, organizing his supplies. "You seem very excited today." "I am." Sadie jumped up from the floor and ran to him. "Do you want to know why?" "Of course I do." She pulled him by the sleeve to where she was drawing. "Now sit here with me. I need to tell you something important." Frank glanced around quickly. Claire was in her office, on the phone as usual, but her conversations seemed shorter lately. He sat on the floor next to Sadie. "So, what's the important news?" Sadie settled in, crossing her little legs, with that serious expression she made when she had something very important to say. My mum is different," she said, her eyes shining with genuine happiness. "Different how?" "She does things with me now." The words rushed out, as if Sadie had been saving it all up to tell him specifically. "Yesterday she read me 3 stories before bed, and she did different voices for each character. The evil witch was perfect." Frank smiled, his heart warming. "That's great. And last Saturday we made pancakes together again. She let me crack the eggs by myself even though she knew I'd make a mess." Sadie laughed, remembering the scene. "And when I dropped a little piece of shell in the bowl, she said it was special seasoning." "Special seasoning." "Yeah, and we ate it just like that." "It was crunchy, but yummy." Frank chuckled softly. It was exactly the kind of thing he did with Emily, turning little accidents into culinary adventures. "And there's more," Sadie continued, too excited to stop. "She asks about my drawings for real now, not just art, that's nice, but she wants to know the stories. Yesterday she asked why I painted the sky purple in a drawing, and I explained it was because it was sunset on the planet of the fairies. And what did she say? That it made perfect sense because fairies would definitely have special sunsets." Sadie sighed happily. "She listens to the whole stories, Frank." "The whole things?" Without rushing, Frank felt a deep satisfaction spreading through his chest. The small changes he had suggested to Claire were working. More than that, she was finding her own way to connect with Sadie. "And she even played hide-and-seek with me," Sadie added, almost shouting with excitement. "Can you believe it?" She hid behind the curtain with her feet sticking out, thinking I wouldn't see. She's not very good at it. Terrible, but it was funny. And then she taught me how to make paper airplanes. We had a competition to see which one flew the farthest. Frank could picture the scene. Claire, always so serious and composed, making paper airplanes and competing with her 5-year-old daughter. "I'm so happy, Frank," Sadie said, her voice becoming softer, more reflective. So happy. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm excited to show her my new drawings because I know she'll want to hear the story." Frank nodded, watching how Sadie's face radiated a happiness he hadn't seen in a long time. It was like seeing a wilting flower come back to full bloom. "You know what else?" Sadie asked. "What? She even apologized." "She apologized?" "Yeah. She said she was sorry for not paying attention to me before, and that she was going to try to be a better mum." Sadie paused, thoughtful. "I told her she was already a good mom. She was just a little lost." Sadie's simple wisdom never ceased to amaze Frank. How could such a little child understand such complex situations with so much clarity? "That was very mature of you to say. I learned from you," Sadie said, smiling. "You taught me that sometimes adults get lost, but that doesn't mean they're bad." Frank felt a lump in his throat. He had said that a few weeks ago, when Sadie asked why her mother worked so much. They were silent for a moment, Frank continuing to clean while Sadie went back to her drawing. But it was a comfortable silence, full of shared satisfaction. After a few minutes, Sadie stopped drawing and looked at Frank with a more serious expression. "Frank?" "Yes?" "Can I tell you something?" "Always." Sadie took a deep breath, as if preparing for something important. "I'm really happy that my mom is different. Really, really happy." Frank nodded, waiting for her to continue. "But I still like spending time with you too." The words were spoken with a pure, uncomplicated honesty. Frank stopped what he was doing completely and turned to her. "You like being with both of us?" "I do." "It's different, but I like it both ways." Sadie thought for a moment, searching for the right words. "With Mommy, it's like having a family again. She reminds me of Daddy sometimes, in the way she listens." Frank smiled softly. "And with me?" "With you, it's like having a special friend who understands. You know things because you have Emily. And you taught me that you don't have to be afraid to say what you feel." Frank felt his eyes well up, but he kept his smile. "You don't have to choose between us, Sadie. You can like all of us at the same time." "Really?" "Of course. People's hearts have room for lots of friends." Sadie smiled, a big, relieved smile. "Good. Because I would be sad if I had to choose." "You'll never have to choose." "Frank?" "Yes. Thank you for teaching me how to talk to my mum. If you hadn't listened to me first, I never would have had the courage." Frank sat down completely on the floor, getting to her level. "Sadie, you are very brave. You always were. You just needed someone to notice. You noticed. And now your mum notices too." Sadie nodded, satisfied with this explanation. She went back to her drawing, but now with a different kind of focus. It was as if a worry she didn't even know she was carrying had been resolved. Frank watched as she drew a new house. This time, it wasn't just 2 figures at the door. There were 3, a tall one with blonde hair, a small one in the middle, and a third figure a little farther away, but still smiling and part of the scene. "Can I see?" Frank asked. Sadie proudly showed him the drawing. "It's our family now. You, me, and Mommy." "Our family?" "Yeah. It's not a family, but it's a family of the heart." Sadie pointed to each figure. "This is Mommy, who plays with me now. This is me, who doesn't feel lonely anymore, and this is you, who is our special friend." Frank looked at the drawing and smiled with a deep tenderness. Sadie had understood everything perfectly. He wasn't a substitute for anything or anyone. He was simply a part of her life, part of the transformation that had happened in that house. And that was more than enough. It was perfect. "Can I keep this drawing?" Frank asked. "Of course, but I'm going to make another one just like it to give to Emily. She'll love it." At that moment, they heard Claire's heels coming down the stairs. But this time, instead of walking straight past, she appeared at the entrance to the living room. "Hi, you two, what are you talking about?" "Frank was looking at my new drawing," Sadie said, running to show her mother. "It's our family of the heart." Claire looked at the drawing, then at Frank, then at Sadie. And she smiled, a genuine smile, unhurried, without tension. "It's beautiful, sweetie. What a lucky family we are." Frank stood up, organizing his supplies. He had understood the message in Claire's smile: gratitude, acceptance, and the understanding that some bonds don't need labels to be real. Sadie had gotten what every child deserves, several adults who cared about her, each in their own way. And Frank knew he had been part of this little revolution of love. It was more than enough. It was everything. Claire was in her office, trying to focus on a sales spreadsheet, when she found herself staring out the window. Frank was in the garden, pruning the rose bushes with the same meticulous care he dedicated to everything. But there was something different today. His movements seemed slower, heavier, as if he were carrying an invisible weight on his shoulders. In the past few weeks, since she had started paying more attention to Sadie, Claire had developed a new sensitivity for noticing details, and something about Frank's posture bothered her. She knew so little about him. Frank had worked at the house for 2 years, always punctual, always efficient, always silent, but who was he beyond that? Sadie talked about Emily constantly now, the girl who drew flowers and loved puzzles, but Claire realized she knew almost nothing about their real lives. She decided it was time to find out. Maria was in the laundry room, folding clothes with her rhythmic movements. Claire rarely spoke to her beyond basic instructions for the house, but that had also changed recently. "Maria, can I speak with you for a moment?" The woman looked up, surprised. "Of course, Mrs. Morrison. Is there a problem?" "No, it's not a problem. I wanted to know, how long have you known Frank?" Maria stopped folding the towels. "Since he started working here, why?" "Just curious." Sadie talks a lot about his daughter. Claire sat in a nearby chair, something she had never done before. "Do you know anything about his family situation?" Maria was quiet for a moment, clearly considering what she should or shouldn't say. "Maria, I'm not asking to cause trouble. It's just..." Frank was very kind to Sadie. "I want to better understand who he is." Maria's expression softened. "He is a good man, Mrs. Morrison. A very good man." "Tell me what you know." Maria sat down too, a towel still in her hands. "His daughter, Emily, she is very sick." Claire felt her stomach tighten. "Sick how?" "A heart condition, since she was very little. Frank told me one day when he came here looking very down, she had spent the whole night in the hospital. My God. He works here in the morning, and in the afternoon, he works for a cleaning company downtown, 6 days a week." Maria lowered her voice. "But even so, he can't afford the treatment she needs." Claire felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. "What kind of treatment?" "Surgery. An expensive surgery that the public health system doesn't fully cover. He's been trying to save money for months, but..." Maria didn't need to finish. Claire understood perfectly. "He never asked for help." "Frank, never." Maria shook her head. "He's too proud. Or maybe he's afraid of losing his job if he bothers his employers with personal problems." Claire fell silent, processing the information. Frank had cared for Sadie with such patience, such kindness, while carrying this terrible burden. His own daughter was gravely ill, and he still found the emotional energy to listen to another child's problems. "Maria, do you know how much this surgery costs?" "I'm not sure, but Frank mentioned it's tens of thousands of dollars." Claire nodded, already forming a plan in her mind. The next day, she sought out other employees. Carl, the gardener who came twice a week, confirmed what Maria had said. "Poor Frank," Carl said, taking off his cap and scratching his head. "Sometimes he comes here looking like he hasn't slept. The girl gets sick during the night. He takes her to the hospital, comes back in the middle of the night, and still shows up here on time. He's never missed a day. Never. Not one day. He's a man of his word. Anna, the woman who came to do the deep cleaning once a month, also had a story. One time I got here and he was on the phone, speaking quietly in the garden. It was the hospital, from the look on his face when he hung up. My goodness, Mrs. Morrison, it was heartbreaking. Each conversation added a new layer to Frank's story. He wasn't just the quiet, polite janitor. He was a desperate father, fighting a lone battle against an impossible situation. Claire began to watch him with new eyes. She noticed how he sometimes stopped what he was doing and glanced at his phone, as if expecting an urgent call. She saw how his shoulders slumped slightly when he thought no one was looking. She noticed the discreet dark circles under his eyes that his impeccable politeness tried to hide. On Thursday, she made a decision. "Frank, can you come to my office when you're finished with the living room?" He nodded, but Claire saw a flash of concern in his eyes. Employees were rarely called to the office for good news. 15 minutes later, Frank knocked on the door. "Come in, please, and you can close the door." Frank entered, visibly tense. He stood near the door, his hands clasped in front of him. "Please, have a seat," Claire said, pointing to the armchair in front of her desk. "I'd prefer to stand, if you don't mind." Claire stood up and came out from behind her desk, sitting in an armchair herself. "Frank, it's nothing bad, quite the opposite." He perched on the edge of the armchair, still tense. "I spoke with Maria and some of the other staff," Claire began. "About you and your daughter." Frank's face paled. "Mrs. Morrison, I can explain, if at any point my performance—" "Frank," Claire interrupted gently. "Stop." He fell quiet, but she could see the panic in his eyes. "I didn't call you in here because of your work." "Your work is impeccable." Claire took a deep breath. "I called you because I found out that Emily is sick, gravely ill." Frank lowered his head. "Yes, ma'am." "And that you work 2 jobs to try to pay for her treatment." "Yes, ma'am." His voice barely a whisper. "Frank, look at me." He slowly raised his eyes. "You took care of my daughter when I didn't," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave her what I wasn't able to give. Attention, kindness, patience." Frank began to shake his head. "Mrs. Morrison, I didn't do anything special. You did everything." Claire leaned forward. "And now let me help yours." Frank sat motionless, as if he hadn't understood. "Emily's surgery. I want to pay for it." For a long moment the office was completely silent. Frank stared at Claire as if she were speaking another language. I can't accept that," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "Why not?" "It's too much money. I can't—" "Frank." Claire stood and went to him. "You saved my daughter. Literally." Sadie was getting lost, closing herself off, feeling invisible, and you brought her back. Tears began to form in Frank's eyes. "I didn't do it expecting anything in return," he said, his voice trembling. "I know. That's exactly why I want to do this." Claire knelt beside the armchair, bringing herself to his level. "This isn't charity, Frank. It's gratitude. It's acknowledgement. It's the right thing to do." Frank covered his face with his hands. Claire could see his shoulders shaking. "Emily needs this surgery," Claire continued gently, "and you need to focus on being her father, not on working 2 jobs to get money that might not come in time." It was then that Frank completely broke down. The tears he had held back for months, perhaps years, finally came. He cried as Claire had never seen an adult cry, with his whole body, his whole soul, with all the fear and desperation he had carried alone for so long. Claire stayed there, in silence, letting him cry. She occasionally reached out and lightly touched his arm, a small gesture of comfort. When he finally managed to calm down, he looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Why would you do this?" "Because you did it for us first, without a second thought, without expecting anything in return," Claire smiled. "And because every child deserves a chance to get well." Frank took a deep breath, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I accept," he said at last. "Not for my pride, but for Emily, for the love of my daughter. That's exactly why you should accept." 2 weeks later, Emily was admitted to the best private hospital in the city. The surgery was a success. Frank spent every free moment by her bedside, holding her small hand as she recovered. Claire went to visit them once. Emily was exactly as Sadie had described, a little blonde girl with blue eyes, delicate, but with a smile that lit up the entire room. "You're Sadie's mom," Emily said, her voice weak but excited. "My dad talks about you a lot." "And Sadie talks a lot about you too," Claire replied, sitting beside the bed. "She made some drawings for you." Emily took the drawings carefully, daisies that looked like little suns, exactly as she liked them. "They're beautiful," Emily whispered. "Can I meet Sadie when I get out of here?" "Of course, you can." In the days following the surgery, something changed profoundly in Claire. Seeing Frank with Emily in the hospital, witnessing the pure and desperate love of a father for a sick daughter, had touched something fundamental in her. She began to pay real attention to the people around her. She talked with Maria about her family, found out that Carl was saving for his oldest daughter's graduation. She stopped to greet neighbors she used to just nod at politely. One afternoon at the supermarket, she helped an elderly woman reach a product on a high shelf. The following week, she stopped to chat with the doorman of her office building and found out he wrote poetry in his spare time. "Mommy," Sadie said one night as Claire was reading her a story, "you're different." "Different how?" "More happy? You smile more, and you talk to more people." Claire stopped reading and looked at her daughter. "You noticed that?" "I noticed you're happier, Mommy." Claire smiled, a genuine, free smile. "Do you know why?" "Why?" "Because I learned something important." "What?" "That when we help other people, we become happier too." Sadie considered this seriously, like when Frank helped us. Exactly like when Frank helped us. Sadie smiled and snuggled closer into her mother's arm. So Emily getting better made everyone get better. Claire kissed the top of her daughter's blonde head. "Yes, my love. Sometimes that's how it works. When we take care of each other, everyone gets better." Outside, the world kept spinning. But inside that house, 3 people, Frank, Claire, and Sadie, had learned something fundamental about love, gratitude, and how small acts of kindness can transform everything. 3 months after Emily's surgery, Claire was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she had an idea. The sun was streaming through the windows, creating golden patterns on the floor, and Sadie was sitting at the table, drawing while she ate cereal. The girl was completely focused on a colorful butterfly coming to life on the paper. "Sadie," Claire said, sitting next to her daughter, "what if we invited Emily over to play?" Sadie's blue eyes grew so wide Claire thought they might pop out of her head. The girl almost knocked over her cereal bowl. "Really, Mummy? Can Emily come here, for real?" "Why not? She's much better now, isn't she? And you two talk so much about each other through Frank. Can she come today?" Sadie was practically bouncing in her chair. Claire laughed. "Calm down, little one. I'll talk to Frank first, see if it's okay for her." "Can I help pick out the toys?" "Of course you can." Sadie dropped her drawing and ran off to make plans, muttering to herself about everything Emily needed to see. When Frank arrived that morning, Claire approached him before he even started working. "Frank, good morning. How is Emily feeling?" "Very well, thank you for asking." His face lit up when he spoke of his daughter. "The doctors are amazed by her recovery. She has so much more energy, playing normally." "That's wonderful. Listen, I was thinking, how about you bring her here one of these days to meet Sadie in person?" Frank seemed surprised. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to be a bother." "Frank," Claire smiled, "the 2 girls have been talking about each other for months. It's time they meet for real." "Emily would love that," Frank said, and Claire could see the emotion in his eyes. "She's always asking when she can meet her drawing friend." Then it settled. "How about Saturday morning?" Saturday arrived with a perfect blue sky. Sadie had woken up at 7, arranged all her favorite toys in the garden, and checked her appearance 5 times in the mirror. "Do you think she'll like me, Mummy?" "I'm absolutely sure," Claire said, combing Sadie's blonde hair. "You're already friends. You just haven't met in person yet." At 10 o'clock, Frank arrived holding hands with a delicate little girl. Emily had light blonde hair and enormous blue eyes. She wore a yellow dress with small flowers and clutched a pink stuffed bunny to her chest. "That's Pounce," Sadie whispered to Claire, recognizing the toy Frank had described. Emily stood at the entrance to the garden, a little shy in the face of the immense mansion. Sadie ran up to her, stopped a few feet away, and the two looked at each other with curiosity. "Hi," said Sadie. "I'm Sadie." "Hi," Emily replied in a soft voice. "I'm Emily, and this is Pounce." "She's beautiful," Sadie said, looking at the stuffed bunny. "Want to see my drawings? I made a bunch for you." Emily nodded, and just like that, the friendship began. Claire and Frank sat on the porch, watching the two girls spread out on the lawn. Sadie showed her drawings. Emily showed how Pounce could talk, and in a few minutes, they were laughing as if they had known each other for years. "She looks wonderful, Frank," Claire said, watching Emily examine each drawing with attention. "She looks like a completely different child from the one I saw in the hospital." "It's like she's been reborn," Frank agreed. "The doctors say she can live a normal life now. Go to school, play, do everything a child should do." "Thank God." They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the girls. Emily had placed Pounce on the ground and was trying to teach the bunny how to draw with Sadie. The two were laughing so hard they could barely hold their crayons. "Look, Pounce wants to make a sun," Emily said, moving the bunny's paws. "And then I'll teach her," Sadie replied, guiding the stuffed paw in circles. "Claire," Frank said softly. "Yes?" "Thank you for everything. Not just for the surgery, but for this." He gestured towards the girls. "For letting our daughters be friends. For letting me continue to be a part of Sadie's life." Claire looked at him, really looked. She saw a man who had worked tirelessly for his daughter, who had cared for someone else's daughter with the same affection, who had never asked for anything in return. "Frank, you don't need to thank me. You've done more for us than I ever did for you." "That's not true." "It is. You taught me how to be a mother again." Frank shook his head. "You always knew how." "You were just lost for a while." They went back to watching the girls. Now Sadie was teaching Emily how to make paper airplanes, folding each corner carefully. "Now throw it up high," Sadie instructed. The two girls threw their planes together. Sadie's flew straight. Emily's made a strange curve and landed near their feet. Instead of getting frustrated, Emily laughed so hard she fell backward onto the grass. Claire's eyes were shining, not with romance, but with a deep, shared gratitude. It was the recognition between two people who had gone through hardship and found in each other not romantic love, but something equally valuable: understanding, support, and the joy of seeing their daughters happy. The same shine was in Frank's eyes. "Daddy, Daddy, look!" Emily ran up to them, holding a drawing, and Sadie taught me how to draw a house. It was a simple drawing, a little house with a garden, two small figures at the door, a smiling sun in the sky. "It's beautiful, my love," Frank said. "It's our house," Emily explained. "Mine and Sadie's. We're going to be neighbors when I grow up." Sadie came running too. "Mommy, Emily can do funny voices." She made Pounce tell a story about a candy forest. "What a talent," Claire said. "Can I play here every week?" Emily asked, looking hopefully at Claire. "Of course you can. This house has too big a garden for just one girl." The two children looked at each other and screamed with joy, running back to their games. From that day on, Emily became a regular visitor. Every Saturday morning, Frank would bring her to play with Sadie. What had started as a get-together became a tradition, then a necessity, for all of them. Claire discovered she had room in her heart to care for Emily too. When the girl arrived looking pale some days, Claire knew how to make the sweet tea that helped her feel better. When Emily got tired more quickly than Sadie, Claire provided calmer activities. Frank continued to work at the mansion, but now the dynamic was completely different. He wasn't just the invisible employee, he was part of the extended family, the father of Sadie's best friend, the man who had helped turn that house into a real home. Claire kept working, running her business with the same competence as always, but now she always made time for Sadie. She had lunch with her 3 times a week. She read stories every night. And when Emily was visiting, she would sometimes sit in the garden just to listen to the two of them laugh. One afternoon, a few months later, Claire was watching the girls play when Sadie ran up to her. "Mommy, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. I don't feel that pain inside here anymore," Sadie said, placing her small hand on her chest. "You know, the pain I used to feel for Daddy." Claire felt her heart clench. "Oh, you don't feel it anymore." "It's not that I don't feel it, I still miss him, but now it's different." "What do you mean?" Sadie thought for a moment. "Before, it was like there was a really big hole inside here, and it hurt a lot. Now there's still a little empty space that's for Daddy, but it doesn't hurt anymore. It's like the hole turned into a little window." "A little window?" "Yeah, a window where I can see the beautiful memories of him, and where he can see how happy I am now." Claire hugged her daughter, feeling tears of gratitude in her eyes. "That's a beautiful thing to say." "It's because now I have you back, I have Frank, I have Emily." Sadie laughed. "My heart is full of people who love me. And Pounce too," added Emily, appearing beside them with the bunny in her arms. "And Pounce," Sadie agreed, laughing. That night, after Frank had left with Emily, Claire stood on the porch watching the garden where the two girls had played. There were still drawings scattered on the grass, paper airplanes in the tree branches, the marks of small bare feet on the lawn. The pain of losing Richard hadn't disappeared completely. There were still nights when Claire missed him with a physical intensity, but the pain had been transformed. It was no longer an open wound that bled constantly. It had become something different, a sweet longing, a gratitude for the time they had, a motivation to live the present well. Frank had found his place in that house, not as a substitute for anything or anyone, but as exactly what he was, a good man who cared for his daughter and cared about other people. Sadie had a present mother and a grown-up friend she respected and loved. Emily had renewed health and a true friend, and Claire. Claire had learned that love doesn't need labels or contracts to be real, that sometimes families are formed in unexpected ways, that taking care of each other isn't an obligation, it's a choice. It's heart. In the silent night garden, Claire smiled. Tomorrow would be Sunday, and Frank would bring Emily for lunch, something that had become a tradition. There would be laughter, new drawings, made-up stories, and the kind of simple happiness that needs no explanation. That's what true love did. It turned houses into homes, employees into family, pain into gratitude,